Okay, let's talk a little bit about the history of redistricting. So in 1790, after the first census, they had one seat for every 33,000 inhabitants. This, as it turns out, was George Washington's only contribution to the Constitution, was giving this number. There was a lot of debate about how many seats they should have for every particular number of inhabitants. So after the first census, we had 105 seats. If we were to keep up this ratio, we would have over 9,000 seats today, and it would look something like the Imperial Senate that we see below. If you want to dig down some Reddit threads, someone actually calculated the number of people, the number of pods, and the number of potential senators you could have in the Star Wars universe. So starting in 1790, after each census, they would really just increase the number of representatives in the House. At some point, they decided, okay, this might get too big. So in 1911, they fixed the size of the House of Representatives to 435 members. This is just by law. There's nothing in the Constitution that says we should have 435 members. So if they wanted to increase the size of the House, all they have to do is pass another law to do this. There's some arguments in favor of this. If we increase the size of the House, each member would represent fewer constituents and might be able to do a better job of representing them. On the flip side, as the House gets bigger, it probably would have to concentrate power in the hands of leadership even more than it is today. Although the way things are today, it might be hard to give them more power than they have now, since it's pretty concentrated. But you could think about yourself some other pluses and minuses for increasing the size of the House, or if potentially you could also decrease the size of the House. I should say too, for a while, mostly prior to 1911, but not always, if a state got an additional district, sometimes they would just assign that person at large rather than draw them a district and change everything and just say, well, this person represent the entire state. As it stands today, members have to represent districts. You're not allowed to have at-large members unless there's only one district for that particular state. So today, the average size district is about 710,000 constituents. So this includes voters, people who are eligible to vote, children, citizens, non-citizens, anyone who's in the district counts. And the range is almost 1 million. So this is Montana. Almost has 1 million voters, or sorry, people living in it. And then the smallest district is about 500,000, and this is a district in Rhode Island. So across states, there's significant variation in the size of districts. We'll talk about later that within states, we can have almost no variation, but across states, we're going to see some variation, and this is because every state gets at least one district. So how do they divide up the districts? So we have 435 seats, and this is based on population. And I'm just going to leave it and say this is based on a mathematical formula. You can click on this link, and you can see the formula that you use. Turns out there's different ways you could distribute the districts. Basically, every state gets one district. And then they use this formula to give the rest of them away. And like I said, different formulas can give slight variations. Every 10 years, we have the census. So the census is going on now, and the census determines how many people live in each state. And the primary reason we have the census is to distribute the congressional districts. Now, there's all these other reasons that are important: how to distribute money, how other things are distributed, but the primary and constitutional reason is to distribute the congressional districts. So every 10 years, it's going on now. You might have gotten something in the mail that you could fill out the census. If you live in the dorm, there's actually a good chance your university counted you. And so when they do the census, we have to actually count people. This actually turns out is not very accurate because this takes place over about a year's time, and things could happen, right? So you could think about if we were in a classroom, I would say, like, give me some reasons that the census would be inaccurate. So if you want to pause and think about some things, you can. but I'll just give you some. One, people are born during the year, right? If you filled out the form today and had a baby tomorrow, that person wouldn't count. So, we can think about some other things too, and some are called undercounts, and some are overcounts. So an undercount are populations that might be missed, and overcounts are people that might be counted more than once. A good example of an undercount that students always come up with is homeless, right? So if you're homeless, you're not going to get something in the mail because obviously you don't have an address. Now there are people, census takers, whose job it is to go out and count homeless people. So there is an attempt to do this. Another group that we might think of as an undercount might be people that don't want to have contact with the government, right? So we could think of maybe if you're not a legal citizen, someone comes knocking at your door that says, "Hey, I'm from the government." You're not going to answer, or you're not going to give truthful answers to the question. Now the census is not supposed to share citizenship or in fact any answers with other parts of the government. But people who are maybe non-citizens or don't want to be counted for some reason are going to be undercounts. We might also have overcounts, and these are people who are counted twice. I think the people most likely to be overcounts are students. So, if you are living in an apartment at college and you get the form to fill out, you're going to fill it out online. Now your parents are also going to get a form. And they might, on the form it says how many people live here, and they're going to think, well, I have 3 kids, and they're going to count the kids. So you're going to count potentially in both places and be an overcount. Other counts that get complicated are prisoners. So there's questions of, if you were in prison, where should you count? Should you count where you're in prison, or maybe where you're from originally? This really matters in a state like New York, where lots of the prisons are in upstate New York. And just based off of population, significant amount of the crime is in New York City. So we can have variations on where those people should count. All right, so after the census, they have our reapportionment. This is the apportionment after the 2010 census. So this is from 10 years ago. We also give the number of districts that each state currently has. Blue states gained members of Congress, and yellow ones, or orange, depending on what this looks like to you, they lost. So you can, and then the gray ones remain the same after 2010. So you can draw some, pretty easy patterns here. So if you look in the Northeast, through the Rust Belt, and some of the Midwest, consistently losing population over time. And then also down in Louisiana, this is probably a function of the hurricane, where people left, and actually a lot of them moved over to Texas. The South and the sort of Sun Belt area of the country, they have picked up districts and representation over time. California has also picked up over time, but not in this last go around. And these are the projections for 2020, and they look pretty similar to the 2010. So where are they losing? Same thing through the Northeast and the Rust Belt. South picks up a little bit, but Texas is really going to pick up. Florida's been picking up over time. And again, through the Sun Belt and a little bit here in Oregon, we're going to see picking up some representation. Again, these are projections. They're going to be pretty close.